Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I've learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I am in a really great mood today. It is 1:11 p.m. I got up, I think about 10 o'clock this morning, and I had slept straight through the night, so I went and vlogged today. And then I did a booktube video, and now I'm just sitting here drinking some coffee and making videos with you guys. So, I thought I would go in today, and I brought my reading glasses, thank God, and all of these different meditation books. So let's randomly pick two books. Okay, I picked The Nightlight by Amy Dean and Journey to the Heart by Melody Beatty. So my random pick, I have no idea what they're going to say to us, so let's hope that the universe is speaking to us in a really positive way. If you want to know about all of my feelings and reactions to the magic book, which we completed earlier this week, that was my video yesterday. I think it's called something like Let's Talk About Magic, or It's All Magic, or something like that. So I'm going to have a sip of my coffee before. Delicious. Let's get into this. It is today is December 9th. So let's read from the Nightlight book first. December 9th. I know I rarely read from this book, but I really like this book. And if you're looking for a meditation book like at the end of your day, this is a perfect meditation because it's for nighttime meditations. But it is also, like, most of the meditations have something to do with kind of like looking back over your past day. So let's read about this. December 9. Risk. Risk anything. Do the hardest thing on earth for you. Act for yourself. Face the truth. Catherine Mansfield. Many times when we feel fear, we don't realize it's related to a risk that we have the option to take. A risk doesn't have to be as dramatic as climbing a mountain or placing all of our money on a bet. A risk can be walking into a new meeting, smiling at a familiar face, or purchasing our first program literature. In the beginning, we may feel fear taking small risks. As time goes on, we learn there is nothing to fear at a new meeting, at smiling at another, or reading literature that tells us who we are. Then we begin to take greater risks, like asking someone to be our sponsor, going out for coffee, or taking the fourth step. This is all like related to recovery. The safety and security we feel when we take risks in the program will help us take risks outside the program. With time, we can learn to trust others, share our needs, and set our limits at home, at work, and with friends. Taking a new risk allows another to soon appear. What is there to fear in taking a risk? Help me learn that each time I take a risk, I open another door. You know, it's so interesting that or that she compares this all to recovery stuff, because I have to say, you know, that everything that I learned about facing fears and, you know, taking risks, I actually really did learn from recovery, you know? And, we talk about that addiction is formed in 100 forms of fear, and I have been somebody that my entire life has been driven by fear, as I think many addicts and alcoholics have been, you know, which is crazy when you think about it, that we're these people that are so full of fear, but we are more than willing to put any substance in our body to make us feel a certain way, which I always think is kind of strange, you know, when you think about it that way. In recovery, we talk about the lack of faith equals being full of fear. And that a lot of people talk about the idea that fear and faith cannot live in the same place. I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that statement. You know, I am somebody that has pretty strong faith in a higher power, and yet I have had moments where I have had fear. I think fear for me is not lacking complete trust in a higher power, although I think some people would see it that way. I think it's maybe questioning my future. I have always been that person that's been kind of like unsure about what's going to happen, you know. I think, you know, today I try to kind of like get excited about what's going to happen. But, you know, when I was in early sobriety, all these things that it talked about were things that I was completely afraid of. I didn't look at people in their eye. That was something that I learned from my sponsor years later when he taught me that I was a person of character and that people of character look in each other's eyes. That was something that I learned down the road. You know, this idea of sharing with one another. Like, I can remember doing my first fourth step with my sponsor back then, and I had everything written down in code. Like, I didn't really want to tell him, like, everything was like people's names and stuff were all in code because I didn't want to tell him, and I also didn't want, if somebody picked it up, you know, then they would know all of Peter Monn's secrets, like as if anybody cared, right? Because that's how important that I thought that I was, you know, that people were like really doing deep research to try to find my secrets out, you know what I mean? Of like, and really, and this is just like on certain parts of my inventory, but I say that and people in recovery always laugh because I think a lot of us did similar things, you know? But I can remember saying to myself, well, I don't want to tell this guy, because if I tell this guy everything in my life, all my resentments, all my fears, all this stuff, right? If I tell him all this stuff, then what if he goes out and uses and then he tells somebody else? And you know, the really sad thing about it is that sponsor that I did that first 4-step with, which was a really thorough 4-step, it was an inventory of my life, of everything that had happened, everything I felt, you know. When I did that inventory with him, he did go back out, and he ended up actually dying as a result of this disease. He died of a heroin overdose. And, you know, I've never once thought that he told anybody. I don't really care, honestly. You know, it's like, my stuff's not that, I don't, it just isn't, I don't really care who knows about it. You know what I mean, today? And so, I think about that back then, and I think that's why today, as addicts and alcoholics that I know, like, we like meet and then instantly we're like sharing really deep stuff with people, you know. And I know that a lot of my friends and like, you know, people around me don't really understand that sometimes, like how close you get with people so early in sobriety. But it's kind of like the sinking ship theory, that when you are going down in a sinking ship together, you've, you know, experienced a similar tragedy as somebody else. And so it's like when you've gone through a recovery with somebody or getting sober with them, it's like you really connect on that level, because it's like, I see you, like you went through this, I went through this. Let's just get to the bottom. Every time I talk about this, there's always one person that's like, that's exactly how we are. Actually, I just was talking to my friend Tanya on the phone, and Tanya said that there's a special episode of the show Euphoria. I haven't watched the show. She said it wouldn't ruin it for me, but she said this show, this episode is, she said, she cried her eyes out through the whole thing, and she said she's never watched anything that was so accurate about what a 12-step program is like to be in. So I'm going to watch that today, but she said that it was like unbelievable. So I'm going to, I think I'm going to watch that today. So anyway, if anybody else out there is interested to see what that's like. But, you know, I think that there's this like fear of shaking people's hands. I had that fear, you know, of going up to somebody. And there were 4 years that I didn't go to meetings. There were 4 years that I didn't pick up, but I had no emotional sobriety and I had no spiritual foundation in my life. And when I came back, I had heard this lead. I heard somebody tell their story, and they were sharing about all this stuff that they started to do, like that they were like doing service work, and they did fellowship, like fellowshipping is when you interact with other people in recovery. And like having fun and social stuff, and that they were, you know, in the text, reading the basic text, and they were doing inventory and whatever. And she said in her lead, and I loved this, she said, it's hard to fall off the wagon when you're sitting in the middle of it. So falling off the wagon is a term, you know, used to like starting to drink again or whatever. And I love that she said, it's hard to fall off the wagon if you're sitting in the middle of it. And, it, you know, I immediately went to this image that I had of my husband and I when we were early on dating. He and I and a friend of ours, and then Tanya and her son, we all went to this, like, what do you call it? It was at Conner Prairie Settlement in Indianapolis, and it was like this headless horseman thing. And we rode this, like, you know, wagon out in the middle of the woods and whatever. And I can remember, like, I was actually sitting in the middle of this wagon, and I was thinking, like, I thought about that as soon as she said that, and I thought, it really is truly hard to fall off a wagon if you're sitting in the middle of it. Well, in recovery, what does that look like? That looks like shaking people's hand, getting to know people, you know. And so when I came back in, after I had heard that lead, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And I was going to the same meetings every day. I was going to a noon and an 8, basically 7 days a week. So I was going to like 14 meetings a week when I got back. And I was going to a lot of meetings at a clubhouse. A lot of recovery groups have clubhouses where it's like a meeting place for that, you know? And so I was going to this clubhouse, and I would walk into that meeting on, you know, at noon, and after having just gone for a couple weeks, because at that point, no matter, it was so scary for me, it was so hard for me to reach my hand out, but at that point, putting my hand out and introducing myself to others, I would walk in that room and people would be like, hey Peter, how are you? Oh, it's great to see you. And, you know, I would stand outside afterwards and talk to them for half an hour or so, and I really felt part of something, you know, and it was, I think that is so pivotal in me growing and becoming, you know, a healthier individual, is being part of something else and not being afraid of people. I've been afraid of people my entire life, you know, and how they're going to hurt me and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's because I grew up being so horribly bullied that I was always very hesitant to get close to people, you know, not to mention people never wanted to really get that close to me. So it was just easier to be a loner and all that kind of stuff. I don't really want to be that much of a loner. You know, I want to have people in my life. if you're out there and you're a loner and you isolate and you don't interact with people and you say to yourself, I don't like people, ask yourself this question. Is it that you truly don't like people, or is it you're afraid of what people will do to you? Because those are two completely different things, and I think I had to be honest with myself in realizing that I really did like people. I liked some people, and I wanted those people around. I wanted to make friendships with people. I wanted to walk into a room and have people go, hey, Peter, how are you? I wanted to matter to people. That was important to me. But for me to matter to people, I had to go out on a limb, and I had to allow people to get to know me. And that's where all that social anxiety comes in. And then, like, you know, and my weight was a huge issue because I didn't want to go places because I was so heavy. So I would use that as an excuse to not want to go places, which further isolated me. And it was like this vicious cycle, you know, which we also call addiction as a vicious cycle, which my weight is probably part of that, you know, as well. And so my weight is part of that. I know that. But, you know, oh, just hit the ring light. So, you know, by doing these small things that to some people probably sound stupid, were huge things to me. Just looking at somebody in their eye and saying, hi, how are you? Or shaking their hand and putting my hand out first, not knowing what they think, you know? Or, you know, saying, hey, can I get your number? Let's keep in touch. You know what I mean? All of these things that I was taught, it's very much like in Karate Kid, this, you know, like wax on, wax off. You're actually learning greater things by doing it. But, you know, like, by waxing on and waxing off, you're learning, you know. If you've watched Karate Kid, you know what I'm talking about. He does, like, wax on, wax off, but he's really learning these moves for karate. Well, in early sobriety, I was really being taught how to be a human being. And when I came back in, you know, after being gone for 4 years, and I really listened, you know, so, like, my sponsor and my best friend both will say, you were like a newcomer when you came back in. It was like you started all over again, except I hadn't used, so I still had this time of sobriety. But I really was like a newcomer, and I like ate it up, and it was like a sponge, you know? And I truly believe today, I really do believe this, that I had to go through the 40 years of not going to meetings to come back and want so deeply what I found in the rooms when I came back. You know, this camaraderie that I have, this friend group that I have today, you know, that I would never have had before. It's not just these superficial friendships, you know, it's like really deep, meaningful friendships that we've gone through things with. I mean, I know things about friends of mine in the rooms of recovery that I'm sure that their closest friends and family outside don't know, you know, and that's not because like, oh, I'm better or I know something more. That's because we share those things with each other, and we're not afraid of that today, you know, there's no fear in that. And there's a camaraderie in hearing somebody say, well, I went through those similar things too, or I relate to that. And so I think it's about getting past all of that fear and taking some risks to say, you know what, I kind of do want people in my life today. I kind of do want to trust somebody. And I think I also realized in my personal life, not just with that, but that, you know, like, every time I meet somebody new, there's a possibility of me getting hurt, right? But there's also the possibility of me not getting hurt. There's a possibility of me maybe making the best new friend that I'm ever going to make, you know? I took a risk with my friend Tanya. People ask me all the time, they're like, how did you meet Tanya and whatever, you know? And, you know, she had just said, why don't you stop by one day, and blah, blah, blah. Well, I had gone into her kennel because I was boarding my dog, and she had said, you know, why don't you stop in sometime, yada, 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 and we'll just, like, hang out and smoke a cigarette and whatever. And I drove by her kennel, like, all these times and was like, no, I don't feel like I can do it. I don't feel like I can do it. And then one day I was like, what do I have to lose? Like, that she'll look at me like I'm crazy. And, like, ever since that day, we've been the dearest of friends, over 23 years, you know? Like, it's crazy to me when I think about that. And that was all based on a risk that I was willing to take. I could have kept on driving by that kennel and never gone in there ever, and she would never be in my life today. And I honestly can't even imagine who I would be if she wasn't in my life today, you know? With my husband, it was the same thing. You know, I saw him out at a club, and I am not the person that reaches out to people and just, like, anonymously is like, hey, like, how are you, or whatever. I just don't do that. But I did, and I reached out to him. I sent him a message on MySpace. I know, MySpace. But, you know, that turned into this 12-year relationship that we've been in, 12 years plus at this point, you know, and 9 plus years married. You got to take risks with people. You do, you know? And I always say to people, like, when they're like, oh, I have this person I want to ask out, but I don't know what to do, or yada, yada, yada. I think it's even harder, I actually think, with, like, friend stuff. It's, like, harder to say to somebody, like, do you want to just go out and get coffee? And it's, like, just totally platonic. Like, people, like, we don't know what to do with that in 2020, right? Like, we don't know how to make friends today, you know? But I think, like, with friends of mine that are like, well, I really like this person, whatever. I'm like, well, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, they're either going to say, hey, I really appreciate it, I'm flattered, but I'm not interested. And that's really not personal. I mean, it really isn't. It's about them, not you. They're missing out on it. Or maybe it was never meant to be to begin with, right? Or you're going to find out that maybe they are interested in you as well. Or maybe if you ask somebody out for coffee, somebody you work with, or start talking to them, you know, that it'll turn into this great thing. But you'll never know. You'll never know until you try, you know. And so you got to take those risks. You know, and I think like with writing a book, with starting, YouTube was a huge risk for me. I can remember sitting over there and I was like, I don't know that I really want to start this thing. I was terrified. You know, I've talked about it on here before about how I was like, oh, I'm going to lose weight, and then in 6 months I'm going to start. And I was like, you're not going to lose weight. It's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen in 6 months. So I just sat down and I filmed my first BookTube video, and you know, here we are 4.5 years later. That was all as a result of me taking a risk, you know, and I'm thankful for that. Those are healthy risks. And I think we have to take healthy risks, right? It's like people say to me all the time, like, I want a new job, I want a new job, I want a new job. I'm like, well, don't quit your old job before you get a new job, but take the risk and start looking. Start dreaming. Like, if you could have any job in the entire world, what would you do, you know? And then going to see what's the path to that. You know, what's the possibility of, like, if you want to work, you know, in a music store, is like a guitar store or whatever, or is it open, you know? Is Guitar Center hiring or something? Go ask, you know? Maybe that's your way in, you know? Maybe go to your local library and, you know, I don't know, put up things for piano lessons or something. I mean, it can all start just in small ways, but you have to, you know, like people that say that they want to be actors or actresses in Hollywood. We'll have you audition for community theater. I mean, it all starts in a grassroots kind of level with yourself believing in yourself, and you have to take those risks, you know? I waited much too late in my life to take, you know, these healthy risks that have made me really, really happy with my life. But I'm glad I have. You know, I'm glad I sat down and actually started outlining a book. I'm glad I filmed my first BookTube video that turned into all of this. I'm glad I did. I mean, so many things I am so happy. I'm so happy that I, you know, sent a message to my husband and that I stopped in my friend's kennel. I mean, on and on and on, you know. There's so many things that I'm just beyond grateful for today that were risks that I took, that I would have allowed fear to stand in the way of me being able to have those things today. Because I wouldn't have those things had I allowed fear to stand in the way of that. So, you know, in recovery we have an anagram. Is it an anagram? Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't think so, but it's fear equals F everything and run. There's a couple different meanings for that, but that's my personal favorite. And, you know, like, and that to me is what fear means, you know? It's like, it's just like, screw everything, I'm going to run away and I'm not going to, like, deal with this. I'm not going to, you know, take a risk, what could be a healthy risk in my life. So anyway, you know, I think we have to be really willing to take a look at those things in our life that we're truly, truly afraid of and seeing where they come from, you know? And I think for me, often it's that I'm such a creature of comfort that I don't really like going out of my comfort zone, you know? But often when I do, typically when I do, you know, like a couple years ago I changed up all my meetings and I started going to different meetings at the suggestion of my sponsor, and I fell in love with these meetings, you know, and I was going to all candlelights, and I just met all new people and made a whole bunch of new friends, you know, and that would never have happened had I never walked through that door. But I was terrified. To this day, I am scared to death to put my hand out and introduce myself to like somebody new, you know, and I know people are like, well, you've been sober for a while, you know, like, and it's like that newcomer comes through the door, and I know that it's my responsibility, because I believe in the responsibility statement, you know, it's my responsibility to go up and reach my hand out, and to this day, I have to work myself up in my head, you know, and it's like, that's my responsibility to go up to somebody and introduce myself, as it is, you know, everybody else is in recovery as well, to go up and introduce ourselves. But man, that terrifies the hell out of me, to go up, you know, and say hi to somebody. I actually, this is crazy, because I used to do like speaking engagements for the treatment facility that I worked at. I could stand on a stage and I could talk to, like, this is probably why YouTube is not hard for me. Because see, I don't realize that y'all are out there just sitting and watching right now. But I could stand on a stage and I could talk to, no lie, at like a conference, like to 1,000 people and have no problem whatsoever, right? But put me in a room with 10 people that I knew, and it was like, I was so scared. Do you know what I mean? It was a completely different story. So anyway, I'm not there today. I've worked through a lot of that, but look at your fear and take some healthy risks in your life, you know, and reach your hand out and shake somebody else's hand or elbow them, you know, and say, hey, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. You know, maybe you'll be meeting the love of your life, or maybe you'll be making the best friend that you ever had, you know. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about that meditation. I'm not going to read the other one today, and I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.